Welcome to this video lecture for Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, 2nd edition, Chapter 15, Closing the Project. So let's look one final time for the phases on our project lifecycle. So we are now at the end, the last phase, which is the closing phase. And so that's what we're going to look at today, which is everything to do with closing the project. Our agenda is first transitioning to the operations of the organization, then reporting the results of the project, storing the project documents and files, and finally documenting the lessons learned. So these all take place during the closing phase. So in terms of introduction, once all project deliverables have been created, the project moves into the final phase, the closing phase. This phase often receives insufficient attention. It is not a long phase. There's certainly work to do, but much less in almost all projects to the executing phase. And earlier phase. It's fairly short, but extremely important. And it often receives insufficient attention. Often focus shifts to the next project. Resources are moved off and the project manager and others become more focused on the next initiative. And that's a mistake. There should be a proper and effective closing off of the project. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this video lecture. And as indicated there should be avoided. So let's move into our first video of this lecture, where we will see what happens in the area of transitioning to the operations of the organization.
The May 8th deadline to complete the project's deliverables has arrived, and Sophie is happy to report to Arun that the product launch is ready. While it was a great deal of work and there were more than a few tense moments, it all came together in the end. Sophie knows, though, that this is not the end of the project. She remembers a project from a couple of years ago when she didn't pay enough attention to the closing activities and instead shifted her focus to a new initiative. The resulting problems were enormous. The operations personnel at Deco Productions struggled to understand and support the new product without her guidance. Not only did this detract from the success of her project, but it also caused some damage to her relationship with the operations managers. Chalking it up to inexperience, she resolved to never ignore the closing activities again. Checking the project schedule, she sees that 3 days of closing activities are planned. Her first priority is to ensure that the marketing department has all the information they need to effectively support this product launch. Pulling out her notepad, she jots down the following activities. Schedule a demonstration of the trade show products, e.g. the banners, holographic cards, multimedia demo. Schedule a presentation of the promotional video to the project sponsor and key stakeholders. Update the marketing department's documentation to reorder banner stands, holographic cards, murals, and tripods. Given these activities, she's confident that the marketing department will have everything it needs to successfully market the product.
Okay, so just to summarize and review some of the key concepts that were covered in that video, many projects create output that will remain in the organization beyond the end of the project. That's probably the norm or typical. Now, there are some projects where there isn't an ongoing product, and that's a little different. But most projects, there is an ongoing product or service or result that moves on and needs to be maintained by the organization. And so that's why transition is so important. A great deal of knowledge is gained about the project scope during the project. There is significant expertise that is gained. And it's important that this information is not lost once the project ends, that once the project personnel go on to the next initiative or leave the organization, that we don't lose that organization. So it's important that it is documented and transitioned to the operations of the organization so that we don't lose this information. A plan should be developed to ensure the effective transition to the operations area. It's not enough just to have good intentions to do it. There should be a step-by-step plan that is developed. So key idea, the product, service, or results of the project should be transferred to the operations of the organization. Okay, the next step, reporting the results of the project. So again, we're going to first watch the video that describes some of the activities during this part of the closing phase.
Checking the communication management plan, Sophie sees that the final project meeting is scheduled for May 13th. The final project report will be reviewed at this meeting, so it's time to get started on this document. The CEO, Casey Sarador, who is known for asking very detailed questions, will attend this meeting. It will be important to thoroughly prepare beforehand. Overall, the project performed extremely well. All of the project goals and objectives were met. While the project's final cost of $61,250 did exceed the original budget of $60,000, there were 2 approved project changes that added $2,000 to the project budget, and the decision to outsource the multimedia demo added $600 to the budget. Therefore, Sophie was actually $1,350 under budget for the project. This reminds her of the importance of an effective change management process. Without the documentation of the approved changes, she might have found herself explaining why she was over budget. As she completes the final project report, she's feeling very good about the results of the project. After sending a copy of the report to Casey and Arun, she also sends a copy to the project team with a note of thanks for another terrific effort on their part.
Okay, so once again, reviewing some of the things that were part of this, activities of this section of the closing phase, as well as mentioned in the video. Recall that during the initiating phase, the project was approved based on anticipated costs and benefits. That was, think way back to initiating when we talked about the business case and so on. So there was an approval process and anticipated, costs as well as benefits. During the closing phase, the results of the project are reviewed to determine the actual costs, to report them, and whether the benefits were achieved. The results are documented in the final project report. Now, to see a copy, an example of the final project report for the case study, see chapter 15 for this information in the textbook. So key idea, the results of the project should be summarized and reported. Okay, next up, storing the project documentation and files. So once again, let's check our video to see what happened in this area for the DecoCam project.
Without a doubt, one of Sophie's least favorite closing activities is locating and storing all of the project documents and files. Inevitably, despite her careful creation of the project documentation guidelines, many of the documents and files are scattered in various locations. However, she knows that it is an important activity to complete. During the DecoCam project, she reviewed the project documents from a previous product launch project on a number of occasions. This information was only available to her because a project manager from a previous project stored the documents and files at the end of the project. With this in mind, she starts moving documents and files into the appropriate folders.
Okay, so once again, to review some of the key concepts that we saw there, many documents are created during the project. There are just, as we've seen during planning and during executing, during all the phases, is that there are many documents. Some of them have multiple versions and so on. And those are, designed to be stored and filed according to the project documentation guidelines that were discussed during communications planning. Retention of these documents is very useful for future project teams. So it's important. That they are stored and maintained for the future. During the closing phase, the project manager should ensure that all documents and files are stored, again, according to the project documentation guidelines that we created during the planning phase. In a perfect world, they'll all be there, they'll all be filed, but sometimes certain files perhaps were misfiled or didn't actually get filed in certain circumstances. So this is a point to put it all, to make sure it's all there and maintained effectively. So key idea, all project related documentation should be archived for future possible reference. So that's something that should be done during this part of the closing phase. Okay, on to our final item on our agenda, which is documenting the lessons learned. This is a very important process that needs to be done or should be done during this part. So once again, we will see what happens during the DecoCam project.
At the end of each project, Sophie schedules a meeting in order to gather feedback from those involved in the project. She invites the project team, the project sponsor, Arun, and the resource manager, Anand Bhandari, to her meeting. First, she asks each person to brainstorm the following questions. What went well during the project? What did not go well during the project? What could be improved upon for the next project? Sophie gives each person a stack of sticky notes and asks them to write down one idea per sticky note. Next, she asks them to stick the notes on the wall with the went well notes on the left, the did not go well notes in the center, and the could be improved notes on the right. As Sophie facilitates the discussion, she groups similar notes together, as multiple people will often come up with the same or similar ideas. She discusses each idea with the group in order to ensure that she understands it fully and that she gathers all of the important information. Once the discussion is complete, she records the results of the meeting in a lessons learned report. Sophie finds that this process helps her effectively manage the meeting so that each person is able to provide input, and it is less likely that anyone will be able to dominate the discussion.
Okay, so again, a review of the documenting the lessons learned process. So while every project is unique, lessons learned during any project may be useful for future projects. There are common elements, common processes, and there are later projects that are very similar to previous projects. So it's very important to both learn from your mistakes and learn what went well, what was successful, in order to remember that and reduce the things that didn't go well and keep doing the things that did go well. So to improve the learning of the organization and its ability to effectively implement projects. Now, many, as was demonstrated in the video, many project team members and other stakeholders should be involved in the collection of lessons learned. This isn't something that only the project manager does or a small subgroup or something like that. This is, involve as many of the team and stakeholders as possible. It may even be useful to have multiple meetings where you have a stakeholder, an external stakeholder to the project lessons learned, a project team lessons learned, perhaps one with the executive team and so on, lessons learned. There can be multiple, they can be broken up into smaller groups if that's more practical. And this is a delicate process because it can be in some instances seen as criticism or blame in certain contexts and certain meetings. So care should be taken to ensure that this is a review of the successes and opportunities for process improvement and not a discussion of performance issues or the opportunity to assign blame. So this isn't a forum where we will say, well, this team member caused this big problem. That's not what we're looking at. We should be looking at processes as, if that did happen, what process could be introduced to reduce the probability of it happening in the future, rather than saying, well, this was a certain person, made a mistake here. This is not the forum for that. And if you do, then people will get defensive and will start to not participate. If you do, this needs to be an open and helpful process, not seen as a place to assign blame. That it will not work if that happens. You can see an example of a lessons learned document in chapter 15 of the textbook. So again, key idea, the project's performance should be reviewed in order to document the lessons learned for future projects. Okay, one last video. This is an epilogue. We've been watching this ongoing case study from the very start, from the initiating phase of the project. So here is just the wrap up of the project.
Arun Singh settles into his seat at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, Nevada. Casey Serador, the CEO of Deco Productions, is the keynote speaker. While he awaits Casey's introduction, he thinks about the recently completed DecoCam version 4 project. As the project sponsor, he is pleased that the product launch was successful. The articles and blog reviews have been extremely positive. Activity on the company's social media channels has increased significantly, and the promotional video has been viewed over 100,000 times. After Casey's presentation, Arun walks over to the trade show area. On his way, he waves to Sophie, Chris, and Maddie, who are on their way to another presentation. As he walks up to the Deco Productions booth, he notices a number of things. The DecoCam signs are very noticeable and are attracting many of the conference attendees, who seem to like the holographic picture frames. A few are even asking if they can have one or two more. There are also small lineups forming to view the multimedia demo. Arun makes a mental note to order at least 2 more cameras and tripods for the next conference. At that moment, Casey walks up to him.
Hello, Arun. Your launch of DecoCam was just great. Thank you for getting this done.
Thanks, Casey, but I couldn't have done it without Sophie and her fantastic team. They really did some great work.
Well, that's good. Version 5 of DecoCam is already on the drawing board, so your team will have a new product to launch soon.
Okay, so that was the end of the DecoCam story from within this ongoing case study within the textbook. And this is the ideal ending that you want to move towards when managing a project is you want successful outcomes. You want stakeholders that are pleased with the final results, the product, service, or result. And note that when you're done the nature of projects, one project is that you are about to start another project. So that is the ongoing nature of it. So anyways, here's some key terminology introduced in this chapter: final project report and lessons learned report. And as usual, you can check the textbook for a full explanation. Some of the references in this presentation, and that's the end of this video lecture.